There is a reason the third floor is locked. Rain hammered the rooftop of Black Hollow Secondary School, as if trying to warn the world of something buried deep inside. But no one listened. Not Principal Madsen. Not the teachers. Not the students. Especially not the janitor, Mr. Harrow, who always left by 4 p.m. sharp. Never a minute later. It was an ordinary Thursday when Marla, a quiet junior with more curiosity than fear, stayed behind after class to finish her painting for the upcoming art exhibit. Everyone had left, and the building had gone still, too still. Even the creaking radiators and flickering hallway lights had gone silent. Her art classroom was on the second floor, and just above it was the third floor, supposedly condemned after the 1992 science lab explosion. But the story was foggy. There had been no fire records, no official reports. Only whispers. Some said students had died up there, locked in during a prank gone wrong. Others said a teacher had gone mad during detention and vanished, leaving behind claw marks on the lab door. At 5:07 p.m., Marla heard footsteps above her. Not just any footsteps, heavy boots, pacing. Then a dragging sound, like something long and wet being pulled across the floor. She froze, paintbrush midair. Everyone said the third floor had been sealed, padlocked from the stairwell. But those boots kept pacing. Curiosity got the better of her. She left her supplies and crept out into the hallway. The school lights flickered and buzzed like dying insects. The staircase to the third floor stood at the end of the corridor, taped off with dusty yellow caution ribbon. The kind that looked more for show than actual security. Behind it, a thick padlock dangled from a rusted latch. Except it wasn't locked anymore. The lock hung open. The staircase beyond looked dry and old, yet faint footprints, wet and muddy, trailed up into the darkness. Marla hesitated, then whispered to herself, "I'll just look for a second." She pushed the caution tape aside and stepped upward. Each stair groaned beneath her, like they remembered every footstep that had ever gone up and never come down. When she reached the top, she found a row of unlit classrooms with windows boarded from the inside. The air smelled of mold, rotting paper, and something worse, something coppery and wet. The air was so still it felt like the hallway was holding its breath. She turned right and walked past the first room. The door was ajar. She peeked inside. Nothing. Desks overturned. Books decayed. A blackboard scratched with something illegible under layers of chalk and dust. But when she turned to leave, she heard something behind her. Breathing. Raspy. Like lungs filled with water. She spun around. No one. The door she had just opened creaked wider on its own. She backed away. Then a voice, low and broken, whispered from the shadows behind the teacher's desk. "Where is my class?" Marla bolted. She ran to the staircase, but it was gone. The hallway had stretched somehow, warped like the school had rearranged itself. She ran back the way she came, past room 3A, 3B, and now a room labeled 3C1. That room didn't exist before. Whispers followed her. Every classroom door now stood open, and from each came a new voice. A boy crying. A girl humming the school anthem off-key. A teacher muttering equations that didn't make sense. The air thickened. She was breathing fog. Her vision blurred. She stumbled into a room to hide. It was a science lab. Old jars lined the shelves, filled with things that twitched when she looked too long. The overhead lights buzzed and blinked to life, one by one. Then a voice right next to her ear said, "You shouldn't be here. They still think it's class time." She turned. A girl stood there, pale, uniform from decades ago, eyes hollow and lips cracked. I just wanted to see." The girl tilted her head, and blood dripped from her chin. "Then stay." All at once, the door slammed shut behind Marla. The windows went black. Every jar in the room shattered, spilling fluid and crawling things onto the floor. The classroom door began to rattle violently, as though a dozen fists were pounding on it from the outside. The ghost girl screamed. The walls bled. And Marla did the only thing she could. She screamed too. From the third floor, no one heard her. No one ever does. Story number 2. The bell rings at midnight. Silence ruled Carrion Ridge High after dark. The kind of silence that felt intentional, heavy, as if something didn't want to be disturbed. But on the night of October 18th, it was disturbed by 4 students who had no idea they were already part of the school's history. Jason, Mira, Kenji, and Alina had broken in on a dare. Jason had the key, stolen from his uncle, the head custodian, and they were only supposed to spend an hour inside. A thrill. A prank. A sleepover ghost hunt in the most cursed building in Hollow Pines County. The school had been closed for 9 years. A gas leak, the official story said. But everyone in town knew the truth went deeper. They said students had gone missing in room 108. They said the intercom sometimes played announcements in voices no one recognized. They said a teacher was found hanging in the auditorium, but no rope was ever located. Jason didn't believe in ghosts. Not until the second-floor bell rang at midnight. No one had touched the old system. There was no power. The bell echoed through the hollow corridors, louder than any bell should have been. It didn't sound like metal. It sounded like screaming, high and thin, like something was being torn apart. What the hell was that? Kenji asked, frozen mid-step, flashlight shaking in his grip. Electrical glitch? Alina whispered, her voice trembling despite herself. There's no power, Mira snapped. We brought lanterns for a reason. Jason laughed nervously and said, maybe it's just the wind. But the wind doesn't mimic the sound of a school bell. The wind doesn't whisper names. From the main hall, they all heard it. Kenji, Mira, Jason, Alina, spoken slowly, like a teacher calling roll. Kenji dropped his flashlight, flickered, then died. Jason stepped forward, toward the origin of the sound. The old administrative office. Don't, Mira warned, but he didn't listen. The door to the office was ajar. Just beyond it, the intercom system sat dormant on the wall. Jason touched the PA mic. Cold. Too cold. He leaned in to speak, then flinched. The microphone had turned warm in his hand. Pulsing. Beating. Like a heart. He dropped it. Suddenly, the office lights burst on, but only in the reflection. The cracked mirror above the filing cabinets showed the room perfectly lit, tidy, and active. Desks upright. Folders stacked. Someone was sitting behind the principal's desk. But in reality, the office was in ruins. Dust hung in the air. Mold crept along the floor tiles. There were no lights on. Look at the mirror, Alina whispered. In the reflection, the person at the desk looked up. He had no face. Just smooth skin where features should be, as if sculpted but never finished. The faceless man stood. In the mirror, he began walking toward the glass. But in the real world, nothing. Nope. We're leaving, Mira said, already backing out. But when they turned toward the hallway, it had changed. The corridor that once led to the exit now ended in a brick wall. Jason pounded on it. This isn't real. The wall began to bleed. Thick, black blood like ink and rot. Then the lockers opened, all of them. Loud, echoing slams filled the air as each locker door swung out. One after another, all at once. And inside everyone, eyes. Dozens and dozens of eyes. Some human, some far too large. Story number 3. Room 241 doesn't exist. Tyler Jackson wasn't supposed to be at the school after 7 p.m. Ironcliff Academy's policies were strict, especially for dorm students. But deadlines didn't care about curfews, and neither did Tyler's failing grades. He stayed behind in the library, tucked away between tall shelves, headphones on, pretending the silence wasn't watching him. At 9:34 p.m., the Wi-Fi cut out, not just for his laptop but for the school entirely. Lights dimmed, even though emergency power was supposed to kick in. The temperature dropped, not gradually, but like a window had opened to winter. His breath came out in fog. He stood up, confused, and realized he wasn't alone. A girl was sitting 3 tables down, facing the wall. Black hair draped over her face, unmoving. He hadn't seen or heard anyone come in. The library had locked hours ago. He pulled out his earbuds. Hey, you good? She didn't answer, didn't move, didn't breathe. He took a step toward her. The wood floor creaked under his sneakers. The girl twitched just once. Her head snapped slightly, just enough for him to glimpse an eye behind her hair. It wasn't human. Too wide. Too black. No scara, no iris. Just a void. Then every book in the library dropped to the floor at once. Boom. Tyler stumbled backward and ran. Not calmly. Not rationally. He burst out of the library, lungs burning, and slammed the door behind him. But the hallway outside was wrong. The school wasn't this dark. The floor wasn't this dirty. The lockers, once blue, were now faded to ash gray, many broken, some swinging open with rusty hinges, and the air smelled like mildew and something rotting. The hallway clock blinked. 2:41 a.m. He checked his phone. Dead. Battery full just moments ago. Then, echoing down the hall. Room 241. Room 241. Room 241. A voice like a child, repeating it again and again, whispering it into his skull. There was no room 241. Ironcliff's second floor ended at room 240. Everyone knew that. It had always been that way. But now, halfway down the hall, where a blank wall should have been, stood a door. Faded wood. Brass handle. No lights above it. And stenciled onto the frame in crooked black paint. 241. The door opened before he touched it. Inside, rows of desks faced a chalkboard. The classroom was lit only by the flickering red glow of an old slide projector. Images cycled through, one every few seconds. He walked in. Click. A boy standing in front of a class, face blurred. Click. The same boy now slumped over a desk, blood pooling. Click. An empty classroom, every desk overturned. Click. The boy again, eyes gouged out. Grinning. Tyler turned to leave. The door was gone. In its place was a brick wall with words scratched into it. Lessons never end. From the projector screen, a figure emerged. It didn't walk. It slid, jerking like a broken puppet. Dressed in a school uniform from decades ago, its mouth sewn shut. The thread was unraveling slowly, and with each stitch that popped, a low moan escaped. Like pain too old to remember how to scream. Tyler backed away. The desks were now filled with children. Dead-eyed, silent, facing forward, unmoving. Some had no jaws. Others bled from their ears. One child had his head twisted completely around, yet his eyes still followed Tyler. He turned and ran straight into the chalkboard. It was no longer a board, it was a doorway. He fell through it, landed hard, got up in a room flooded with ankle-deep water. This wasn't room 241 anymore. This was somewhere else. A janitor's closet? No, a morgue. Dozens of lockers lined the walls. Body lockers. But instead of names or numbers, they bore subjects. English, history, math, biology. The locker labeled math creaked open. Inside was a body, his eyes open, chest unmoving, skin cold. Then the PA system buzzed to life. Mr. Jackson, please return to your seat. Class is in session. He ran again. Door after door, hallway after hallway, none led out. The school had become a maze. Walls bent. Floors sloped upward. Gravity tilted. Windows looked out into blackness. Like the entire building floated in nothing. Somewhere a bell rang. 241. Again. The same time. Over and over. He passed room 241 again. It was everywhere. On every floor. In every wing. Every door led to it. And inside each time, the children waited. One time, they turned to face him in unison. Another time, they chanted, 2, 4, 1. We are the forgotten ones. The last time, he didn't run. He asked, what do you want? The teacher at the front, a woman with no eyes and her face peeled open like paper, answered without moving her mouth. We want someone to remember. You came, so now you stay. Tyler screamed, but screaming didn't help. Because Ironcliff's room 241 doesn't exist. And that's exactly where he'll be. Forever. End of chapter 1. Story number 4. The basement bell never rings. Rain battered the broken skylights of Aldergrove High School as the storm clawed at the town. The building had been condemned for years, sealed off after the 2009 boiler incident that killed 3 faculty members and hospitalized 12 students with injuries no one could explain. The official story blamed a gas explosion, but those who'd been inside swore they heard screaming before the blast. Screaming from below. No one knew why the school had a basement. It wasn't on the blueprints. Not even the oldest alumni remembered it being there. And yet, after the explosion, a door had been discovered behind the boiler, sunken into the foundation like it had always been there, waiting. 12 years later, at 10:19 p.m., 4 friends crept through the rusted chain-link fence. They wore black hoodies, boots, and brought only flashlights and phones with dying batteries. It was supposed to be a dare. Go inside, take a selfie in the boiler room, post it online, become legends. The wind howled through the halls as they entered. Eli, the ringleader, laughed as he pushed open the warped front doors. "It still smells like death in here," he joked, though none of them smiled. Behind him came Carmen, his girlfriend, nervous but proud. Then Jonah, the skeptic, already regretting it. And finally Danny, the quiet one, who hadn't said a word since they passed through the gate. She was the one who wanted to come, the one who brought the map. They moved through the ruined hallways, stepping over broken glass, curled textbooks, and pieces of ceiling that had fallen in long ago. The paintings of former principals stared down at them from the walls, each one's face smeared by water damage into twisted, melting expressions. The basement door waited beneath the stairs. It was newer than the rest of the school. Thick steel. The keypad lock now shattered. The edges of the frame bore deep scratches, as if someone or something had tried to claw its way out. Jonah hesitated. "This wasn't here before. I came here during the fire cleanup with my dad." There was no door. Danny stepped forward, gripping her flashlight tight. "It wants to be open now." The others stared at her. "What?" Carmen asked. But Danny had already pulled the handle. It opened without sound. The stairwell beyond descended into complete darkness. The air that rose up from below was warm and wet, like breath. They descended slowly, the stairs creaking with each step. Water dripped from above. Somewhere deep below, a dull clang echoed, like metal striking metal. "A bell," Carmen whispered. "Did you hear that?" They all had. When they reached the bottom, they found a narrow hallway, longer than should be possible. The walls were covered in lined paper, thousands of sheets, all filled with handwritten detentions. Each page had a name, a date, and a reason. Jackson Reeve, October 18, 2004. Cheated during final exam. Leah Monroe, May 2, 1997. Disrupted class with screaming. Alan Yates, September 11, 1986. Wouldn't stop crying in room B5. Danny Thorne, April 13, 2021. Entered where she shouldn't. They stopped walking. "Danny," Jonah whispered. She stared at the page with her name. "I've never been here before," she said. But her voice sounded far away, like it was being filtered through water. Then came the bell again. Louder. This time it came from directly ahead. And it rang exactly 6 times. They turned a corner and found a room labeled Detention B5. This door stood open. The room inside was lined with old wooden desks, nailed to the floor. A chalkboard at the front read, "Stay until you learn." Jonah looked back at the hallway. It was gone. Not just turned, but vanished. The doorway now opened into another room. And behind them, Danny was already walking to the front of the class. "Don't sit down," Carmen shouted. But Danny did. The desk wrapped around her like vines. Wood stretched, grew, locked her in. She didn't scream. Instead, she looked up and said in a voice that wasn't hers, "Class is in session." The chalk behind her began to move, on its own. It wrote, "Eli, Carmen, Jonah, late." Then the door slammed shut. The lights flickered. Eli rushed to the front, grabbing Danny's arms. "Get up. Come on, Danny. Don't play like this." She turned to him slowly. Her eyes were solid black. "You're too late, Eli," she whispered. This school only keeps what it's owed. Jonah ran to the door and tried to pry it open. Carmen screamed. From beneath the floorboards came knocking. Not like pipes. Knocking in sequences. 1 knock. 2 knocks. 1. 3. 1. Again and again. Jonah backed away as the wood under his feet began to splinter. A hand, thin, gray, and soaked, burst up through the floor and grabbed his ankle. He fell kicking, trying to shake it off. The hand pulled him down, slowly, methodically, dragging him through the floor like it was mud. Carmen grabbed his arm, screaming his name, but another hand reached up and latched onto her face. With a gurgling sound, the floor split open wider, swallowing them both. Eli screamed. He turned to Danny, his last chance. But she was gone. In her place sat a girl he'd never seen before. Pale, dripping wet, wearing an old Aldergrove uniform from the 1970s. She smiled. "Late again," she said sweetly. He turned to run. But the room had changed. He was no longer in B5. He was back in the hallway, but all the doors were open now. From each door, a pair of eyes stared at him. Students. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All silent. All forgotten. And behind them, a sound rose up like a final bell. Ding, 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 ding. Too many times. More than any real bell should ring. He dropped to his knees.